All right, good afternoon. Did everybody get their snacks and all of their appropriate fuel for our last session? We kind of thought we should have probably done happy hour during this session. It would have been a better fit. My name is Heather Pettit. I am the education chair for CTALK. If you haven't seen us around, we are the technology leadership organization for the judicial branch, national organization. We have flyers around, so after you get through with any of our presentations, if you are interested or your technology person is not a member of CTALK, please invite them, give them the information. We are a huge resource, and it kind of sets up why we picked this session and designed this session. So why we did this is we pulled many of our existing CIOs to figure out what they were doing to be successful, what they needed in the future, where their gaps were, and why we were having challenges between communications with court administration or judges or CIOs or the technologists in general. And what we found is that people don't understand, they don't know what to expect. They don't know what to get from us and what we want from them, vice versa. So what we wanted to do is have a really candid conversation about this. And so what you'll find is this is not an educational PowerPoint. This is just more of a guidance so you know what we're asking and we're talking about, and we want this to be interactive with you guys, to talk about problems and issues that you're having, to maybe we can come up with things that can help you be successful with implementing technology and dealing with your technology folks. So we have a Poll Anywhere. So some of you may have used Poll Anywhere, so we've got a couple different surveys throughout this, and this is a format which we're kind of doing an interview, and we're all gonna have points and counterpoints. We wanted to have it so we have a really nice diversity. So I'm the IT person, I wear my IT hat. We have our judge hat with Judge Hine. He is going to give you a judicial perspective because they are the other third wedge of the pie that we have to please and work with. And then we have Kevin Bowling as our court administrator to really talk about the different perspectives when you're dealing with technology in the world today, especially in the courts. So our first Poll Anywhere question that we have is, does your court practice strategic planning? All right, so when you do your Poll Anywhere, you get your cell phones out, you text to 2233, type in CTALK polling, and then you will either hit an A for yes, a no, a B for no, and for some reason my letters went away. So A, B, C. So yes, we do practice strategic planning. No, we don't. Occasionally when we have time and the money is C. Text it to 2233. It's up on the top, right there. Yeah, 333. I can't see how many threes are on there. No, just a text message. Yeah, to CTALK polling. Yeah, you just text it. Regular text message will work. So you do CTALK polling space A, B, or C. And hopefully it'll work. Did yours work, Casey? It should be open. I opened it. That's really weird. All right, raise your hand if you're doing strategic planning right now. If your court practices it, okay? No? No? Okay? And occasionally when you have time and money. Okay. Yes, occasionally when you have time and money. All right, perfect. Okay, so I want to actually send this question over to our panelists to talk about if they do strategic planning, how they do it, and what area, oops, go back here, how they do strategic planning. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, in our jurisdiction, a strategic planning process didn't exist years ago. We recently, now a little over 10 years ago, started a robust strategic planning process that involves all of our different court divisions, all of our different court locations, and we involve folks from the judges, chief judges, right down to the frontline staff. So in that process, we go through a very structured strategic planning process. If you want to look at a NACM resource a couple of years ago, there was a strategic planning mini guide that pretty much outlines a very similar process to what we use in our jurisdiction. And oftentimes what we find in the course of going through the strategic planning, that technology issues emerge, either as a barrier to move some project forward or something that we want to add into our mix of things.
So when does your technology partner get involved with the strategic planning process?
That's a great question. I don't know how all of your jurisdictions are set up in our environment, and I've got some of my staff here who may want to weigh in on this as well. But we have a county in Michigan. We're a decentralized court system, we're funded locally, and we're heavily reliant on county resources and county departments to get a variety of things done. IT is one of them. So the IT department's in the executive branch of government for us, and then we have to beg, borrow, steal, cajole, advocate for projects, and we're actively working with them all of the time.
Great. How about you, Judge Hine?
I think Kevin and I are going to stand just because we can't help it. Let me put this in perspective. My answers are going to be a function of who I am and where I came from, so you need to understand that. Kevin's, well, I'm going to say a larger jurisdiction in western Michigan. I'm a small rural county, single judge county in western Ohio. We have a municipal court and probate juvenile, but for felonies, domestic relations, and criminal, that's me, period. 53,000 people, so I'm on the rural side, the small side of the world. In Ohio, that's probably the norm. We have 88 individual counties. There's no state unified court system. So like Kevin, we have to find our own local resources. We don't have a court IT professional. My court IT professional is whoever the vendor is that has a subject product that I think I'm going to be interested in. It's my vendors, my IT specialists, or other judges who have used an application that I want to integrate. So I can't walk down the hall. I can't go to a specialist that's on my team already and say, hey, here's an idea. The IT specialist is me, which means I'm in big trouble. I do strategic planning because I don't want to stand in front of all you folks and say I don't. Nobody's going to stand up and say they don't, right? Of course I do strategic planning. I read a newspaper article about something new. I talk to my kids who are 30 and younger about what's going on in their world. I find out from other vendors at these conferences, thanks for having me here because I'm stealing ideas. I talk to you folks. And my strategic planning is every time I think of an IT situation or a problem in the court that I want to solve. So the answer is yes and no, because that's a poor way to do strategic planning. There's nothing systematic about it. When do I consult the IT specialist?
Yes.
Right after something breaks.
Right after something breaks. So.
Not a good thing either.
No,
it's not exactly that bad, but we all do it. Somebody's desktop goes down, so you get the call, because I'm the IT specialist. We got a problem, so now all of a sudden we have to deal with it. You understand my perspective, but then that's the norm in the state of Ohio. There are a handful, say a dozen large counties, maybe 20 at most, that have enough resources to put that kind of person on, but rarely do they. So there's 68 counties or so that do it this way. And we're supposed to be an industrial northern state that people say do things right at times. I'm not sure that's the right way to do it right, but it's the way we do it right. That's my perspective through most of the day, is coming from that direction.
Right. So from a CIO perspective, I can tell you from when a situation like that happens, it's really hard for us to fix it and stay on task. We need to be part of the strategic planning from the beginning. We have to. It's kind of been a theme, if you've heard any of our sessions, is that if we're not there in the initiating stages and the thought process, we can't help you as effectively as we could if we were there. And more importantly is that we can only come up with half of a solution that may solve a piece of your problem instead of coming up with something that really takes it to what the users need, what you need to be successful. So it's really important during that planning session that we are part of the table. We are there, whether it's even if you just have somebody who's your desktop person, or if it's the county, whomever that is, it's really critical that you have that IT person sitting with you as these ideas are coming to inception and you're beginning your planning phases. And more importantly, have a plan, any plan, because it's really difficult for us, and we're like this, it's the ever-changing world, to shift priorities, because shifting priorities for us on millions of dollars worth of projects is really hard to do. Because now I have to come in and give the bad news, which is the truth of, guess what? I can't work on this now because 3 other new pet projects just came in, and then you want to know why. And this is where we have IT burnout and things of that nature. So really making sure that the CIO or the IT person is at the table when these beginning talks occur is absolutely critical. All right, next question. All right, so when rolling out a technology project, how does your partner communicate? Is it effective? Are there areas that you would improve or change? And so, you want to start with this one?
I think I will again. One of the things when we look at effective communication, something that we struggle with, and I hear from people that do a lot of the treatment work or that are doing counseling work in our court or others, is the importance of developing relationships. We don't wait until the last minute when you've got a courtroom that goes down and you've got a judge screaming at you saying, how come the damn computers don't work? Or how am I going to finish this hearing because the video system isn't working or something like that. But we work really hard at trying to develop relationships with those local experts that can come in and help troubleshoot, help prepare ahead of time. And as we build those relationships, part of what we find, how many of you have internal IT people in your court?
Wow,
Okay.
that's a lot.
So that's more than in some of the other sessions that I've seen hands on. So you have quite a few there, and that's great. But what we find, those of us that don't have IT people embedded in the court, many of them don't understand court processes. They don't understand what our fundamental mission is, or how important it is to keep a courtroom up and running once you get started on a particular docket. And because of that, you can't wait till there's an emergency to begin to fix that. You have to, and I think part of CTOC's message through all of their sessions here has been bring us to the table. Have us involved early on. Develop those relationships and help the IT professionals that perhaps don't do courts 24/7 understand who we are, what we do, and what the critical infrastructure is that we need to have working all the time.
Absolutely. All right, Judge?
Okay, my answer is right there. In the courtroom, demonstrative evidence is important. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So there's my answer. The answer is I agree with what Kevin just said. And you can go back and tell your bosses or whoever sent you here that you learned about the Wizard of Oz. But that's essentially what you always have to visualize when you're going to roll out some sort of technology improvement. Look at the personalities. Everybody knows the Wizard of Oz, 1939. You know, if you can see it well enough, there's the wizard, Dorothy, right? There's the lion, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow. And they represent something. Now, I don't know what they represent, but in my world and the people I run around with, we would all agree that the judge is the wizard. You don't have to agree with that. But now if you're a court administrator, which one of those characters do you think is you? Anybody care to venture a guess? Just go ahead and claim one. Toto?
Toto.
That's probably really good, always getting kicked around. Yeah, fully get that, but that's not an option. That's a great answer. That's a great answer. Okay, so if you're a court administrator, pick one of those. What if you're the IT person? Who do you think in that picture represents your role? The IT person. Who do you think that might be? The wizard.
The wizard.
The wizard, maybe. Go to the next screen if you would. Someplace in those 5 roles, you have to have the judge, you have to have the court administrator, you have to have the IT person, you have to have the funding authority, you have to have the public or the consumer or the user. So it doesn't matter which one of those personalities you want to assign, just recognize you have to have those. It could be in my world, I'm the funding authority and the judge, and half the time the court administrator, usually the tech person, so all I have to do is figure out who the user or the public is. I'm not saying that's a good role, that's not a good model, but take away the Wizard of Oz, because every IT project you roll out needs to be that same collaborative that you talked about, Kevin.
Yeah, I would agree. The one thing that's really, I think, is important is that if you are not getting good communications from your IT people, that's bad. There's no reason why they shouldn't be communicating. And fundamentally, there are tools out there, whether it's project management tools, but any program or IT project you do should have a communication plan associated with it. It doesn't matter what it is. Every court should have a communication plan of how you deal with any type of item, whether it's technology, whether it's a media. You know, one of the things I found very interesting is that, you know, we were listening to what happened with Missouri, and I'm like, wow, they need a PIO. You know, a public information officer to give information. That is a CIO's job as the technologist, to be the evangelist for technology and be able to communicate that information in terms that they understand. That if I don't have a technical judge, I need to make sure that they know that I'm talking about something that makes sense to them. Like, you will not be able to do your job right now unless I fix this. You know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, that scary, but it can be that honest and to the point, I need to go fix this. So having those communications is really, really important. And if you're not getting that from your CIO, then you need to sit down with them and have that conversation of, how do I get this information? Because sometimes I will tell you, the reality is that they're afraid to tell you the truth. And I teach a project management class, and the first thing I always say is, tell the truth. It's really, really hard to tell someone thing they don't want to hear. And to disappoint the judge or to disappoint your court administrator, it's hard. You don't want to do that. So it's really hard to muster up I can do it, and really lay it out there. But if you create that open relationship that we're talking about, where they can tell you the truth, where they can be okay with letting you know the reality of the situation, you will be 10 times more successful. And if you've even created a plan with the strategic planning or some sort of planning model, then you have your backup plan when it doesn't go right.
And just to follow up on that, to have that open environment where IT folks can feel comfortable communicating with the court is very important.
Yes.
I think Heather and some of the other CTOC members that are here today are an aberration. Knowing several of them, you're outgoing.
That's true.
You're outspoken. You can say what's on your mind. A lot of the IT people that some of us work with are used to being cloistered. They like the closed environment of their cubicle or of their office. They do better in a quiet environment. They're not the outgoing, extroverted people that you're describing.
Right.
So sometimes it's incumbent on us as court managers to create that environment, make it welcoming, so that they can come and give us not only the good news when we want it, but also the bad news when we need it.
Right. And as court administrators, don't get mad at us if we can't fix it right away. Sometimes it's just a reality. Or judges, because the ultimate thing is, I want it now and I want it to be perfect. Technology doesn't always work that way. So, okay, so since Pull It Anywhere is not working, we'll do a show of hands. So the next question is your CIO leader part of the executive team? So show a hand that your CIO or your IT leader is part of your actual executive team. Wow, that's actually pretty good. So this is one of those things that we've talked about it. We're going to continue to bring this up. When you're making decisions about how you want to plan, how you want to move forward, it is extraordinarily critical to have those people there to bounce ideas. I say this often, and it's one of those things that if I don't know what you're really thinking in the direction you want to head, I can't provide you a solution. Or more importantly, I'll sit around the table with our executive team, and they're talking about solutions when they haven't even defined what the real problem is they're defining solutions not to the problem that they actually have. And so what really good IT leaders do is they can sit there and go, okay, wait a minute, what was the reality behind this? What are we trying to solve here? And they'll stop you, and it'll feel kind of offensive. It's like, okay, wait a minute, why are you stopping me? I have a mission, I know what I want it to do this, this, and this. Well, it may not be the right problem that you're solving. We can help you with that. That's what we should be doing, is helping you with that. Kevin, you want us to take that?
Sure. In our environment, many of you have got internal IT people. I didn't raise my hand for the poll in terms of having the IT professional on our executive team because we've got a separation of powers issue.
Right.
Where our IT folks are in the executive branch. They're not in the judicial branch. So what we end up doing oftentimes is having our internal leadership group, our strategic planning group, set some priorities, but then it's incumbent on us to bring in the IT folks and have that conversation. I think, unfortunately, sometimes we think we know all the answers.
Right.
and we have to be open at least to other ideas, and make sure that we are willing to have that honest communication with the IT professionals when we sit down and start working through it. Because they're in the executive branch, we often need their support, especially when the county executive is looking to them when we want money for some project, a new case management system, a new jury system, a new video recording for the courtrooms or something like that. When we submit our budget requests, the county is not going to say, okay, court asked for it, let's give it to them. They're going to turn to their IT specialist and say, is this a good idea? So we have to make sure, even if they're not in the first round of those conversations, that we bring them in early on and include them.
But I got to flip this. So
Yeah.
since I don't have an
You're
IT
the IT
specialist,
person?
and since a lot of people here don't have an IT specialist, how do you bring in an IT specialist early in the project? Because I don't have one.
So
Solve that.
So one of the things I think that is you have to do is you do have, whether it's a county CIO, whether it's a management, what I used to do, because previously when I was the CIO in Sacramento, we had all of our case management systems run by the county and so forth. I would meet with the county CIO every other month and have conversations on the initiatives that were going on. And I did that purposefully because I wanted to, one, create a relationship. Then we would go play golf on occasion. That was whatever you can do to create that relationship. If you're assigned, like you said, you had multiple people who you work with, whomever that person is in charge, that's the relationship you want to set up. And if you ask them that you need someone to work with so that they are better equipped to knowing what's coming forward, because they have to plan their resources too. It is for any IT organization to say that they don't plan or they can just give you and do whatever they want. I can tell you that is not true. We plan well in advance. We have to. We do not run by this, we just don't, we're hairs on fire. It can't be. I mean, every day is a crisis mode for IT, whether you realize it or not. Every day someone brings a crisis to us, and all we do is we take a deep breath, okay, and we make it happen and we fix it because that's our jobs. So you have to start those conversations early. And if they know that you are being a planning cycle, so for example, I would say, if you're starting a planning cycle right now, let them know. Call whoever the CIO or the top person that they would work with and say, we are starting a planning cycle. We want to get you guys involved. Give us a project manager, a state level. Give us somebody that we can work with that at least can relay that information, a liaison of some sort. The only way to do that is that's how you can at least, they know. And if they then say, didn't know, and they can't give you the resources, you told them well in advance. Any other thoughts on that? Have you guys had other ways that you have addressed that type of situation?
In the courtroom, I'd say it's a great answer and non-responsive. Because she never got to, I don't have IT. You just put yourself in the equation.
That's true.
But I don't have you. So what do? I'm going to give you my answer. My IT specialist that I have to consult early is a commercial vendor.
Right.
So I have to remember to get the commercial vendor involved very early. But that almost begs that I've made a decision.
Right.
Well, how can I make a decision when I don't know what the options are and the vendor's not going to give me a different option? So in my world, since I don't have
You call
this,
us.
unless she's a consultant,
For free.
who then, and those resources are out there. If you can find somebody that'll come in and do that for you, great. I have to bring in competing IT companies, commercial companies, right up front and not even have a RFP. I'm not that far into it, saying here's my dilemma. Maybe you don't even provide the service, so I talk to 2 or 3 or 4 different commercial vendors in that field to see what they'll say, to see how much talking they'll do. They don't talk money, I never ask, because we're not there yet. But automatically, I have to get outside of government, probably a really good idea, find out what's moving out there, but be willing to bring in foreigners. In The Wizard of Oz, I got a foreigner in the group. But that's okay because I invited him in, so there must be a certain level of competency or trust that I think they exist.
Yes.
In a lot of the world, it's tough.
Right.
If you know who to send it to.
Or
So
you
that's
reach out
where
to
very
us.
much,
Or you reach out to
very
us.
much you find some sort of a consult. The House Supreme Court has a technology department who can do that. It's not their main job. Okay, I do that when I read. I do that when I talk to my colleagues to try to find out what else somebody's doing. My theory of the world is whatever problem I have right now, somebody already solved. I just got to find that person. And that's why network is really important.
Yes.
And you're exactly right. How do I know what I don't know?
Yep.
I don't know what I don't know. It's
That's the
impossible
benefit of
to know that.
CTalk right there.
Yeah.
We have a listserv and we gather all the data right there. So that's another great.
Can I write that down?
Yes, you may. We will allow you as a judge to participate, even though since you are the lead IT person in your organization.
She gave me her cell phone number. Yes, personal consultant. Good to know that there's a bidding service, just to repeat that you can find those. And
Yeah.
if CTalk has a listserv,
We do.
that
we
very
do.
much is why you got to go to these kind of conferences and get away more than 25 miles from home.
That's right.
So,
All
thank
right, next question that we have. Okay, so this is a very interesting kind of dynamic because we have two kind of types of CIOs. Does your technology leader contribute new technology solutions or just get her done? And that's the reality is sometimes they go in, if something's broken, fix it. If it ain't broken, don't touch it. Or do you have a CIO who actually is one who brings in new solutions? So which one of you guys want to take this first? All right.
We have a variety that are available to us. Sometimes we may reach out directly to the CIO or our IT director, and there may be some ideas or suggestions there. Oftentimes what we do is we've identified some of the younger folks in the IT department who haven't got a lot of boundaries set up yet. And they
That's
come
great.
in with lots of ideas and they want to fix things, but sometimes from a court management standpoint, you have to be very careful on how do you sift out the great new ideas from the absolute insane suggestions that are going to get you in trouble a half a dozen different ways. So it's just a question of how do you gather that information, and do you learn enough about IT yourself so that you know enough to be dangerous. You may not be able to fix all the problems, but you can filter some of those suggestions that might come in.
Right. All right.
I had a slide to kind of answer this. No, go to the triangle.
Let's see here, the triangle. Come on, little guy. It's moving slow. Triangle. Okay.
There it is.
There you go.
Okay. I've worked on some other larger projects, so this isn't just my own rural experience. In the what I call the information triangle, all these different levels are to be considered. There's a bias we probably all have that which is at the top of the triangle is the most worthy. And if you're an executive, sure you want to buy into that. But in terms of adapting technology, Kevin's saying the same thing right now, is you look for those people who might have fresh ideas that don't have a built-in bias or didn't have limitations placed on them to narrow their focus. I'll take any good idea that comes from anywhere. The workers at the bottom are often the people that have the most valid ideas, but you think, bottom, what can they possibly know? They have the least experience. When in fact, I think that's fertile ground for really good ideas. So don't develop some sort of a bias that the top of the triangle is somehow valid. You have the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
The top of the triangle on the next slide is the Pettit principle, right? People get promoted to the level of their incompetence. So at the top of the triangle, what do you got? I don't know what you got. In my world, it's me. I don't know what we got. Understand the Pettit principle is valid to a certain extent. So if you play those two together, just because somebody walks in and they're the owner of the company or they're managing projects, doesn't mean that's the person you really want to be talking to. You have to find the competent person, the person that didn't get one too many promotions, and you don't want you to have one too many promotions either, because who wants to go through life doing something that they're incompetent to do? Not that you can't learn, but if you get somebody that just moved up and they don't have that competency developed yet, the Pettit principle is staring you in the face, and then you run back to the same problem we had before, is how do I know what I don't know? So the request for information you suggest is a good idea. Bring in other vendors, and I don't usually like to talk to the owner of the company or the salesman. If the salesman comes in, I know what his best suit is. Now, talk to me the guy that's going to actually do what you're going to sell me and bring him along. Because the implementing people, the boots on the ground employees are going to put that technology in, is the one I want to be talking to. So I'll take all these ideas from anywhere. And there's another little caveat, is make sure that person doesn't have a vested interest, and that could be your own IT specialist. Because if we can get this project for the judge to buy into in 30 different courtrooms, that's a lot of work for us, so I want the court administrator to give me this job. And I got a vested interest in my own IT department. He's not coming at you with anything other than his own personal interest. So you always have to watch out for their bias. You might think commercially, I got to make a sale. That's a bias. It's a problem. But your IT people, you could have your own agenda.
Right.
Be ready for that.
So,
Heather, on
yeah.
the earlier triangle,
Yeah.
you're looking at the bottom, just to connect the dots between some of the CTOC sessions. Some of you were in the session this morning, and Kevin Iverson was talking about different creative ways that you can reach out to these people, including, help me out, he had one, was it an Information Day?
Yeah.
Where you
Or
can-
Innovation Day.
Innovation Day, where you can bring all of your staff together and provide a place, a forum, some place where they could just creatively think outside of the box and look at different kinds of solutions. There you are, Kevin. I didn't spot you over there. So it was a great idea that you suggested, and it gets at this point of how do we reach down into the players that we have on the ground in all of our courts and try to get that information or ideas or suggestions from them. Because often they really know what the problem is that needs to be solved.
Exactly right. That's where the problem came from. Nobody knew there was a problem until that worker said, here's where it doesn't work.
Right.
So how can you take them out of the solution? But we automatically do because they're a new deputy clerk who's just out of whatever and doesn't have 3 weeks experience. You would say, well, what do they know about the solution? They found the problem, give them a little credit to go attack the solution.
Right. And I will tell
do you
you
say?
from the CIO perspective that this is one of those areas is that if you have somebody that's working for you, that's your IT person, that isn't asking those questions of what you're solving, or they're just going to say, okay, I'll do it. Yes, sir, no, sir, or yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and they just go off and create something, you have the wrong person at the table. Do not have people like that. They will never innovate you. If our mission is to serve the public, you need to have people who are willing to step outside of their everyday lives and take a look around and go, okay, so what can we do about it? You know, and if they don't know, and even one of the great things is as a court administrator, you say, you know what I just told you is an idea. Take it back, stew on it for a while, and have them come back and think about what other ideas are out there other than their first initial gut instinct. Because sometimes it's hard to think out of the box if you haven't been doing it for 20 years. So go out, do some research, and come back to me with some of the different alternatives. That's one approach to take because that gives them the door to be a little bit more creative. But if they can't do that and they don't want to do it, they are not your IT leader. They are somebody who is going to simply continue to keep you at status quo, and technology is moving too fast for us to stay status quo. If we're lucky if we can just barely hang on to the tail end of it as it's running by. So our jobs are to find somebody or keep that in mind that we're always trying to think forward, always trying to reinvent ourselves. That's our jobs. And change should be welcoming to your IT person. They should want to embrace change, not be afraid of it. All right, let me go back to my next question. Let me see here. It's moving really slow. This is why I almost plugged in my Apple. Yes. Let's see here. All right, so let's go back here. Okay, who managed technology projects in your court? So if it's your IT manager who manages your technology, raise your hands. No? Okay. Yeah, one? Okay. How about a court business analyst? Do they manage IT projects in your court? No? Yes, kind of, sort of. Okay. How about an IT project manager or PMO? Wow, that's actually really good. That's a lot. A court manager, okay, and then anyone who I can get to do it. See?
I didn't even know who the first 5 jobs were. Who are these people? Are these people out there?
They are people who are out there, yes.
Project
okay,
manager?
so Kevin, you want to tackle this one?
I think sometimes it's a matter of degree with a lot of these. There's a difference between, getting a software patch or something on somebody's PC versus putting in an entire new case management system over all of the divisions in your court. So there's that whole range of people that you might need to have at the table depending on the size and the complexity of the issue or the problem that you're looking at. One of the things that I'd wanted to mention to the court managers in the room is that there are resources that will help you think about some of these issues as you're working through them. And as part of the shameless marketing division of NACM, something that you need to do is think about the NACM core, the new core competencies that have come out. In the core package, the curriculum that is set out for operations management, there's a whole section on IT management that's written and designed for court managers to think about and try to figure out how you get at some of these issues, who you need to have at the table, when they need to be at the table, what the differences are among some of the projects that you might have to deal with. So that might be a resource for you to take a look at.
Yeah.
What he said.
What he said, okay. So the thing about technology projects is that, those of you who actually know me or ever seen me speak, I'm like the queen of project management. I am obsessive about project management. I live, breathe it. I make my staff live, breathe it. I came up with my own eight-step program. At CTC I went over. The thing is that even if you are somebody else, if you're a business analyst, you are any role, court operations, pick some sort of framework, stick with it, and use it. If your IT people are not doing this today, you have a problem. Your projects will not be successful. You have to have a plan and you must stick with it, because without the project management plan or somebody managing it, and more importantly, have a single person to manage your projects. One person. And it can be, again, it could be a court manager. If they have the tools and they know how to ask the questions, that's perfect. They can work with the IT. But you have to have 1, a plan, 2, a collaboration between operations. So if you have an IT project manager, they need to be working directly with a person or a group of people in operations to give them the information. I literally just had a conference call yesterday about what we're doing with our new case management system. And our ops people were like, well, IT needs to learn all about business operations. And I said, no, I'm not going to learn about business operations. What I need is for you guys to give me the resources who are the experts in this, and you can design the system you want. I don't run your system. I don't do the work every day. I need you guys to define it for me, and we will work with you to make sure you get the product. That's not IT's job to design the system. What IT's job is to create the technology that you can use to be successful. And more importantly, the technology needs to be equal to what you're doing today, but more importantly, it should be better than what you're doing today. Technology should never hinder you or slow down your existing processes that you have. And so when you're talking about managing projects and who does it, you always have to keep that in mind. It's really critical. And it is not IT's role to define and do the work for you. You want them to learn the business processes because they don't get it. They don't understand why we do, why we take a piece of paper and move it 5 places. In their mind, it's like, okay, just take it from point A and move it to Z, right? They don't get that. So we need the experts to help us understand why that is, and that partnership is absolutely critical. Okay. Any other thoughts you want to add? No? Okay.
Oh, we've got a
Yes.
question over there.
Yes.
I absolutely love project management, and the reason is that not only can you use it for IT projects, but once you're good at it, you can use it for every project.
Absolutely.
And you have follow through, you have communication built into it, and it's really a powerful tool.
Yeah.
So it behooves everybody to get on board with project management everything, not just for IT purposes.
How does the spaceship get built? How are all these, constructions, these massive buildings? They're all project management. You know, and that's the thing is that I took over facilities and security for our court, and really was a no-brainer because, again, it's all project management. It's all making sure that you're communicating properly. And when you hire or if you're looking for an IT professional, make sure that is one of the sets of tools in their belt. And if it is not, right now, send them out and get training to do it because they have got to be the leaders that focus on this, and that keeps them organized. Because when you've got literally all these issues coming in at you at the same time, you've got to have a way to organize your workload, and project management does that. Okay, and apparently it is working right here. So, how does your technology leader prioritize a workload for the courts? Did you actually fill that in? That's so funny. Okay, well, it's like magically working now. Okay. Oh, he got it logged in. Yay! Thank you.
He's awake.
Yay!
Somebody's paying attention.
All right. So, is it a governance or strategic? Court administration sets the plans. The bench sets the priorities. Or what are priorities? What are priorities? So right now it looks like you guys. We said we have a strategic planning. The administrator sets the priorities. Oh, very nice. The bench. So that's tied between the bench and the administrator. Wow, interesting. And then what are priorities is 11%. Wah, wah. Okay. Well, this is absolutely critical to have priorities. Like I said, it makes it very difficult.
The numbers are changing.
Ah, I see. The court administrator sets it. Okay. Very nice. All right. Well, do you want to tackle this, Kevin?
Sure. I don't know if it's tackling it, but just a description of it. In our environment, something that we found very helpful on a county-wide enterprise level is to have a technology advisory committee, a group that's actually set up. In that case, it's not at the front end of the court strategic planning process, but it is at the front end of the county process. And it is run by the county CIO, our IT director in this case. So in that situation, having an advisory group, it's very helpful because from that project management standpoint that you're talking about, it brings together department heads, court administrators, and others on a regular basis to say, what's actually going on? How many different technology projects do we have going at any current time, larger ones? What are the resources that are allocated to them? Do we need to change those resources? Do we need to reassign IT staff to get things done? And part of it is also looking at the future. So as we work on capital improvement plans and are trying to set aside money for the next 5 years, what do we know that's going to come up that's going to be a big ticket item? So that becomes a critical piece of our process. But then as you move down from there, we haven't historically done so well with this, but right now we're working on a rewrite of a legacy case management system. That's an internal system. So as we go through that, part of what we had to do was to begin to look at project charters. How are you going to scope this out? What kinds of things need to be done? And as you go through, making sure that we're bringing in the right people throughout the entire organization to sit down and test run prototypes as they're being developed and laid out. So that's all part of this, overall, when we think about governance structures, we often think at high level committees, but it gets at your pyramid again in terms of bringing it down to make sure you have the right people throughout the entire organization, including right down to the folks that are actually doing the day-to-day work.
How did that just change? I see. Did you guys change your responses? All right, Judge, how about you?
I said it before, my highest priority is what just broke. So that's going to happen, just plan on it. Don't be surprised, expect it. So just own the fact that whatever you had today that works eventually is going to have a problem. So just take it in stride and don't think it's a big deal, even if it's a big deal, which really goes to the second point of our priority setting, is planning for what's going to become obsolete. Hardware is going to go out, software is not going to be updated. You're running systems right now that eventually aren't going to be operational in X number of years. There's a shelf life on it. So you have to plan to replace existing systems. I don't want you all to leave here thinking we don't have electricity and running water. I have technologically in the courtroom everything I need to be an efficient, functioning court. And a lot of my neighbors think that it's just like way out there. I'm not way out there, but I have everything I need. So I'm not really prioritizing the next big thing. I'm saying, how do I maintain all those things I have? Where I need the most work is on back office operations, management side, which at this point in time hasn't taken a lot of priority for money purposes. So get ready to have something break, and then look at what you got right now just to be able to maintain it. When you get ambushed by something going out of shelf life, that's definitely on you. You know, it's not the surprises, it's the things you ought to see that you sometimes don't see. And I have to make sure I don't fall asleep on that.
Yeah. So there was a second part of this question of, does the governance process really exist? So I can tell you, if a governance process doesn't exist in your world, we had an actual session on governance that's got some great material on the different types of governance models. You need to have a governance process. And the key is that the three of us here could be a governance.
Yes.
That could be it right there, the judge, the administrator, and the CIO. Because if we're not talking and working on what the priorities are, pet projects come in. The judge's best friend just got finished playing golf and now wants a new project to do something that's special with juvenile. I mean, and now we have to design a brand new solution for it, which then takes us off of what we were working on that the court administrator just set as our #1 priority. There has to be some way to vet out what the impacts are going to be, because again, IT every day is juggling a bunch of balls, because we've got your projects and then you have all the issues that are coming in. I locked out my password, I can't do this, something's broken, etc. So for us, it's which balls do we want to juggle the most and which ones we don't. So we have to be as organized as we can be.
The cautionary note with that is that in the court world, when we talk about governance structures and making decisions by committee and all of that, we automatically start thinking about long-term processes. Sometimes technology issues aren't going to wait for us to go through that whole process. So as we set up a governance structure, whether it's one or many, we have to make sure that it's nimble enough to deal with issues as they arise.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I've been reminded of multiple times by CTOC members and other folks that work on technology projects is technology is not the problem. The technology exists to do pretty much everything we want to do or need to do in the courts. It's there. It's a question of, can we get to the point where we can sit down at the table together and have a rational conversation about how we're going to implement it, how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to make sure staff are trained, and those kinds of issues. And that's really the key of the governance process in my mind. It goes back to where I started with the relationship building.
Yep.
And making sure that we've got those relationships so that we can sit down and have those critical conversations.
Yeah, you had a question? Yeah, leave.
Good point.
Goals versus implementation.
Right. And I will say the other thing is that if you, as we've talked about kind of the type of IT person you want as a leader, if you let them do their jobs. I mean, it's really hard to not want to participate and actively engage in it. But if they're going to tell you, well, first off, don't ever let them tell you that the technology can't do it, because 9 times out of 10, that is not correct. And if there's any technologists here, they probably would, get really upset, but that's the reality. But if you've been doing the same thing for a long time and there's new things out there, sometimes it's hard to think that, I can do this. As a matter of fact, I've had several programmers, I believed in them more than they believed in themselves, and it took them to be able to learn something new and do it. They were so excited in the end, but they didn't think they could do it. But we know they can, so it can be done. The technology is there. It's never an issue with the technology, and I think that's a really valid point. The other thing is that when it comes to governance, it needs to be strategic. It needs to be at that level. And I completely agree with that statement. Let us do our jobs, because we should be able to, take how many hours it's going to take us to program this and do this and how many resources I have. And that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. So if you allow us to do that, then we should be able to get you a roadmap of where you want to go in the future and an actual legitimate plan.
IT bias.
I do have IT
Put
bias.
my bell curve up here. Here's my
Yes.
answer.
All right, here.
I want you to take two things away from whatever I can say today. The Wizard of Oz is one of them.
Hold on, it's still going.
So take that away and just picture those 5 roles in one place. Here's the second thing to take away. Everett Rogers has this study, and it's essentially adaptation to technology. The study's like really old, 1962, but it keeps getting validated. And 1962 was like before we put the man on the moon, before computers, before phones, all these things, but still technology was changing. A lot of adaptation. He comes along and he takes the population and he breaks it into segments. Your bias was, as an IT person, you're at the far left end of this bell curve. 2.5% of the people adapt to technology very quickly. A small percentage. These people, here's the description of that 2.5%. Willing to take risks, youngest in age.
No. No.
Financially lucid, very social. They have contact with scientific sources. They interact with other innovators a lot. They have a high risk tolerance, and they're acceptable. It's okay to fail. But only 2.5% of the people. She just said, get this IT people involved, and implied that that's her. Now, I'm not saying she's not, but you can't just assume because they're IT that they're going to very quickly adapt to technology. The next group, 13.5% people, are early adapters of technology. They sound a whole lot the same in terms of being younger, but they essentially are more discreet in adapting technology. They're not the first person to the dance, but they're there pretty quickly. The third group, what they call the early majority, they get there at varying degrees of time. It's almost like they're seeing the trends. These people seldom hold positions of opinion leadership. I think that's a big deal, because the innovators are people who are very willing to stand up here and give you their opinions. That doesn't mean it's right, but you want to look for that in people. And as you get farther to the right, I'm going to say they become more reactive, that they're not leading, they're not innovating technology, they're getting dragged through life. You have to know in your governance group where people fall on this scale. If your governance group is 5 people in the far right side of this, adapting technology isn't really going to happen ever, maybe, somehow, and whatever you adapt is going to be so out of date and old it won't matter. If your whole governance group is in the left 2.5%, the court administrator, the judge, and the IT person are just way out there.
That would be the bleeding edge, right?
Yeah, that's the bleeding edge, right.
Know that. I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong. You have to understand the temperament of people to adapt, to implement, to take risk with technology. Because you just put yourself in the 2.5 or the 13.5, which I fully appreciate. You wouldn't be here if you weren't that way.
That's true. That is very true.
But don't assume that everybody's going to be like Heather when it comes down to owning the cutting edge or the bleeding edge.
Absolutely.
And that's a big thing to take away. You can find the resource. It's in the slides and material. But that was the only thing I could, I think, give you today that's really going to help you a lot. And then put that with the 5 Wizard of Oz people and see where they all line up. I don't have the answer for you, but at least it's a way to look at, because I sometimes wonder why I'm beating my head against a wall when I got this great idea and I don't want to just like order and decree people to do stuff. Consensus building has its place, but if you're all over the board, then you got to figure out how to nurse people to the
middle,
left of middle to actually want to get it done. And I think if you have all your people on the 2.5%, you'll be implementing change for the sake of implementing change so fast you won't ever really use it because the next thing will come along.
That's true.
You could be out of balance that way also. If you look at the characteristics, often it talked about young as the left 2 groups, But I don't know that they really meant to say age. When I started, I was 42 as a judge, and I'm not there anymore. At that time, it was easy because I needed to adapt and go with it. But I still think I keep in my own mind young with technology. I have a little thing on my monitor at the office that says, no computer complacency. I just taped my own little note there because it's easy to get old regardless of your age, i.e. complacent, and you never want to get complacent with any aspect of your job.
Right.
Then you're not forward thinking, then you're not planning everything else. So there's a,
I was gonna say, what it also said down at that 2.34, whatever that percent is.
Right.
You know, it said having the resources.
Right.
To do it. And what I can tell you, we find ourselves in is very limited resources and trying to balance out which of these projects are gonna have the biggest return.
it said financially lucid. It's not resources, it's understanding resources. You're right, but you automatically shut yourself out if you think you don't have the money, because then the money becomes the answer. It's the awareness of the cost of the adaptation. Financially lucid, aware of how, for sure, budgetary is one of my 5 interest groups. But I hear from my colleagues all the time, I can't afford to do that. They don't even think about everything else after they shut their brain off because I can't afford it. Because you can scale a lot of things, you know how to work around. It might be you have to allocate money over 2 or 3 years, but, and I don't mean to call you out, but my colleagues,
15 projects that ought to be done.
then it's prioritized.
Yeah.
And I do have some resources.
Then it's priority.
Then it's,
Doing all of them.
Yeah.
but it's, but that's where the priorities come in.
And that's the planning.
That's the key,
That's
the
strategic planning. What's
Yep.
first, what's second, what's next year? Fully agree, but it's easy to let everybody get lazy. And the budget guy's not even at the meetings. He doesn't even know what I do every day, so he's not going to say there's not enough money, because there's never enough money.
Right,
I'm gonna tractor with now.
right. All right, we got to keep going because we're running out of time. Okay,
There's another.
yes,
That lady right there.
Deborah.
yes.
I just wanted to ask you a quick question.
Huh?
So, when you're looking for an IT manager, you had mentioned project manager. I've had 2 in the time that I was doing this together. One was very knowledgeable of the lingo used in technology, but didn't really have experience in the field of technology, if you know what I
Right.
mean, but could manage the project. The other person I've had worked his way up all the way through, he knows all about it.
Right.
So now when I say, how long do you think that's gonna take? You can talk to him, the developer, but then he knows if you're giving him a good answer or not.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if you have any thoughts on, when you're recommending to people, who to look for? Do you want someone who really understands it, or is it more about managing the project?
So it's funny, the plenary session on biases that we had, I totally use my gut when I hire people. I always have, which is, it's kind of interesting, but I think that what you have to look at is, when I'm looking at resumes, I look at practical experience. The one thing about IT that's very different from any of the other industries, and we mandate education, people in IT are not formally educated necessarily. But I tell you, if they have certifications in certain types of technologies, they understand the process, they have done the physical, actual work, they will be a much bigger asset to you than if they don't, because they can be taught the operational necessities or the business process, but it's really difficult to teach a business person the IT stuff, the components. And so it makes it interesting because a lot of IT people are not formally educated. They go and they get lots of certifications, and they're making, in the private sector, copious amounts of money, and people don't understand why. Well, it's because what they do is so complicated and so technical. You have to be able to do really multitask 20 things at once, and then remember what you did and how to repeat it. And so I would say that you're gonna wanna pick somebody who has practical experience, who has tried and true. You gonna say something, Casey?
No, I was gonna say, I completely agree. One of the things that we tend to have to fight against in IT is HR will look for formal education and wanna say, well, this person's got a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, and this other person is out of high school or is in community college,
It does. You want to look for somebody who is interested in the technology, who's engaged. Not interested in talking long-winded reasonings why we do it. That's not a technologist. You want to have to work with them on their ability to communicate with people. Does that make sense? But they need to know what they're doing, and they need to be able to do it fast. Technology people and I will tell you, when I came in, I went from Sacramento, which was a massive state-of-the-art, and I got recruited to go to Contra Costa. Every employee, staff member who had been working there said, nobody can work at this pace. And I go, this is what the private sector does. This is how you live and you operate. You've got to be able to multitask and training, getting them up to speed, and either they're going to want to embrace it or they're not. But that's a reality, and they've got to be fast. They really have to be able to think on their feet.
Here's the pushback.
Yeah.
Some 20-year-old surfer shows up with a backpack, a keyboard, and sandals and says he got the answer to my problem. He might be the person you just described.
That is exactly right.
But I'm looking for Gandalf,
Right.
right? So how you communicate that person's intellect is hugely important, because her answer is exactly right. I often look at the psychology of group decision-making.
Yeah.
And if the surfer boy shows up, he can be brilliant.
Yep.
And I'm going to look at my grandson or something like that and go, he can't know anything. Where's the gray hair and the beard? Who could be on the wrong side of the adaptation curve.
Yeah.
And that's group decision-making.
And actually, we were actually talking about what we'll do some next sessions about, but that is exactly what we're talking about, is the types of people, because the types of people you have in IT, tattoos, very different, they are out there, but they are people who can fix your problem 10 times faster and get it up and running, who can redesign a website in 3 months. But it's changing how we think about how we do business. So, okay, so we're running out of time, but we have one last thing. So what advice would you give to your counterparts on what they would do working with technologists?
I think most of the things I've already touched on in terms of forming relationships and doing it early and often and spending time with them. As I was thinking through this and as Heather posed some of these questions to us, the thing that kept going off in the back of my mind was, don't be a jerk. I'm not quite sure how else to say it, but sometimes as court managers or as lawyers or judges, we come to the table thinking we've got all of the answers because we know our process. We know how things ought to be done. We know the code, or we know the Constitution, or we know the statutory requirements. But that's not our job, to be a jerk when we come to the table. It's a matter of leveraging the expertise, the talent that the IT people are going to be bringing, and laying out our problems, but then asking you to help us understand how can we best fix it so we can move forward.
In the world of the Wizard of Oz, I said there's 5 stakeholders. There's, I think, actually 5 personalities. In your strategic planning group, in your implementing of technology, you got to identify who the person is that's learned or experienced. You got to figure out who's the person that needs to be more thoughtful. The person has to have more courage to make the leap. You have to find somebody that's got more compassion for implementing this. You have to find the personality that's the need, because that's essentially what all those people are. I never know what to do with Dorothy, except I think she's always the public. She's always the person with the need. She's always the worker that's looking for somebody else, her 3 companions or the wizard, to help her. Those 5 personality characteristics exist. And if you only have 3 people in your group, you're still probably going to have to look for all 5 of those group decision-making personalities to actually implement something. Otherwise, you end up being on the backside of the adaptation curve. It takes consensus building, and if you had 15 people in your team, you're still going to have to come up with, I think, those same 5 groups. So the Wizard of Oz isn't really about those 5 stakeholders. It's about the 5 personalities in those stakeholders to make decisions. In the end, most people think you got to do technology. I'm always beating my head with, why don't people do it? And that goes back to reasoning, and that goes back to decision making. So that's my conclusion, is how to look at the problem, and that's how I try to get through life.
All right, so just kind of the key takeaways here. Have a plan and include IT in the beginning. Communicate in all directions. You always have to communicate. If you're a court administrator and you come up with a great idea, ping your IT person to say, hey, I had this idea. is it even feasible? Is it something that we could do? What would it take to do it even before we start going and selling it and marketing it? And then you talk to the judge. Do you think people are going to buy into it? What's going to happen? Really important. Allow the technology leader to be part of the decision-making process. Very important, because you may have in mind that you want widget A, but it costs you $50,000 when I can turn around and say, yeah, I can do widget B and it'll be free. That's a huge difference, and I've just saved you money. So help the technology leader understand the business to provide better solutions. Give them the resources. So often, if you're rolling out a new system, you want to think it's perfect when it gets delivered from IT, but there isn't operations there to validate that it is perfect. Work with them as a partner on every single level of a new initiative that's technology related, whether it's the testing side of it, it's the designing or the developing side. There has to be that partnership. And then support and direct the technology leader in prioritizing workload. Again, very important. Sometimes they don't want to deliver the bad news. So what a lot of CIOs do, and we actually talked about this in our last annual meeting, is they keep taking on the workload. They keep taking on the workload. And guess what? All the projects never get finished then. None of them get finished because all they keep doing is taking on the workload because they don't want to let you down. The reality is that they may not want to put a priority, but you may need to say to them, I want you to work on this first, this second, and this third. And once you finish this point of it, then you move on to the next one. They may need you to tell them that because they don't want to be the ones to say that and disappoint you. And then lastly, the technology leader along with court leader in judicial leadership, they need to be the evangelist. They have to be the evangelist. It is our job to promote what the benefits are of the technology. My job is to convince these two, and it's their job to go out and take it out along with me to talk about how great what we're going to do. Oh, but by the way, this is the impact. This is what the reality of the situation is. You know what? You may not have paper anymore, but I'm going to give you this as an alternative tool. You know what? Test it out. Feel it out. Take it for a test drive and work with me on this. And creating those types of expectations that there is going to be change is the only way you're going to be successful. All right, so we officially are, actually we're not really over because apparently we have an hour and a half, 15 minutes for tomorrow's session as well. So the timing was a little off. So do we have any questions that anybody has? Thoughts? You guys are ready for happy hour? Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys very much. We appreciate you guys.